Hey, what's going on? It's your boy Dalton from the Petrol List, and thanks for tuning in to the Monday video. Please like, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. Keeps me up there on the algorithm. Anyway, we're going to be talking about the Canadian GP today. It was exciting. We had weather changes, we had lead changes, we had tire changes, thank goodness, after Monaco. So it was the kind of race that people who are a fan of racing would want to tune into. So let's get started. I'm going to talk about qualifying briefly. Lewis Hamilton qualified 7th. It was his worst starting position in the Canadian GP in the history of his entire career. The Ferraris finished 12th and 11th after a high at Monaco. The McLaren stayed brilliant, qualifying 3rd and 4th. And Russell got a surprising 1st and Verstappen 2nd. A little bit about that one. Russell and Verstappen did get identical times down to the thousandth of a second. It just so happened that Russell got his time first, which, as tradition and the rules would have it, whoever gets the time first is basically the tiebreaker and gets the pole position. The person with the identical time who got that time second gets second place. Russell did have a great start. He held on to that pole position lead for quite a few laps. But the brilliance here was with Haas. They decided to go with the full wet tires, and Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg were loving it. They were having a field day. Let's see. By the end of the second lap, K-Mag was up 7 places. By the end of lap 4, K-Mag was up by 10 places. It was a thing of beauty to watch. He started 14th, ended up in 4th position, and by the end of lap 8, they had pulled K-Mag in for a pit, but guess what? That pit was 8.6 seconds, dropping him completely out of the points. If they had the traditional Formula One under 3 second stop, I think that K-Mag would have had a decent chance of at least finishing in the points in the race, but it was sadly not to be. So lap 15, a dryish racing line was beginning to develop. It was wet enough on the racing line and off the racing line for drivers to transition a little bit out. So we got a little flash of brilliance from Daniel Ricciardo right around lap 15 when that window was still open for overtakes. But the racing line was starting to dry out, and the contrast between the racing line and offline was so much that the minute drivers started to go for an overtake, they had to go right back in to that dry racing line so that they didn't lose traction and spin out, which did happen a couple of times throughout the race. Now, this negatively impacted Verstappen, who by lap 15 and lap 16 was closing in on George Russell, and he was closing quickly, but nowhere to go with it. And Norris was firing up those tires, and he set the fastest lap during that time frame, and he was quickly closing on Verstappen. So lap 17, Verstappen's frustrations at the increasingly narrow racing line showed when he went off track. He had the momentum, but he had nothing to do with it. He kept closing with Russell, but he had nothing to do with that momentum. Couldn't overtake, went off, corrected it quickly, but Norris was now chasing Verstappen. So basically, what we were having fairly early on in the race was a 3-team battle for first place. My theory there is that teams are catching up to what Red Bull did correctly when they first launched the 2022 car. There's a ceiling to performance for any of these cars. Even if you've got Adrian Newey designing the aero, I think Red Bull is fighting that. The RB20 is still an amazingly quick car. It's the dominant car, but the likes of McLaren and Ferrari are definitely catching up. Even Mercedes, the sun shines on a dog's behind every once in a while, and Mercedes was actually doing well during this race. McLaren, absolutely, absolutely brilliant. I want to say by lap 25, Norris had broken open a 15-second lead. A 15-second lead. We're talking Lando Norris, 15 seconds ahead of anyone, and that anyone does include Max Verstappen. I am not gloating that somebody had a lead on Max Verstappen. Maybe mid last season, I would have just been happy about that. But I think now that the racing is happening, may the best driver and team win. And at that time frame, it was absolutely Lando Norris. But then tragedy struck. And I want to say it was Logan Sargent crashed out, causing a safety car, evaporated Norris's lead, and eventually Verstappen would come in with the overtake. Now, McLaren was brilliant, but there is another M team on the grid, Mercedes. Oh my gosh. So they put Lewis on mediums by lap 45. Russell was put on hards lap 46. Different strategy, whatever, go figure. Leclerc was also out at this point due to engine failure, and not before some classic Ferrari tire strategy faux pas. I think they put them on hards in the wet, and they put them on wets in the dry, and it was just a mess. On top of that, engine failure, and just an overall bad day. Lap 51, Russell goes off. Wait a second, hold on. Oh, we've got to go back. Marty, we've got to go back.
Marty! You've got to come back with me! Where?
We've got to go back to lap 21. So, lap 21, Norris uses DRS to pass Verstappen, and by lap 21, Norris also passes Russell to take the lead by late braking him. Now, here's where it gets strange on lap 21. Here's where it gets strange. After Norris passes, Russell veers off track for seemingly no reason, and it allows Verstappen to utterly, catch him and pass him. But the weird way that he went off kind of reminded me of the soccer players when they grab their knee to try and draw the foul, draw the yellow card or whatever card it is. They just kind of like roll on the ground. Ow, oh, my knee. And then the next play, they get up, they're playing. A whole different story. But that kind of looked like what Russell was doing. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what to do with that. And in my opinion, right after that, he had an unsafe rejoin to the track, but it went unpunished. So anyway, back to lap 51. Russell goes off the road again, possibly due to the mounting pressure from Norris. But again, Norris ultimately gets the pass. Lap 54, Sainz crashes, taking out both himself and Albon. So no Ferraris left. No Williams cars left at that point either. And also, Perez had already crashed by lap 53 as well. You would think that Perez would be a little bit more relaxed and confident, having his contract extended for 2 years, which in Formula One terms is a very long contract. But he keeps crashing. I'm not exactly sure what to think about that. But so let's get into Mercedes. I actually don't even like talking about Mercedes anymore because of how they are, but I've got to. It's part of the GP. They're part of the grid. So Mercedes did the strange thing with roughly 10 or so laps to go. I don't know. I couldn't find the footage. They switched Lewis Hamilton to hards while putting George Russell on mediums, or maybe he was already on mediums. But anyway, they switched Lewis Hamilton to hards, which they were complete garbage. Everybody knew that the hards were garbage at this point, especially this late in the race. You got 10, whatever, 15 laps to go. They put him on hards. Russell is on mediums, and by lap 69, George Russell passes Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes basically, it really smacked of Abu Dhabi 2021. They basically put Lewis Hamilton out there to dry, and essentially orchestrated it for George Russell to pass. That is disgusting, in my opinion. As far as team leadership integrity goes, I am a bigger Red Bull fan than I am of Mercedes right now, and that is saying a lot. When Lewis Hamilton leaves Mercedes, Mercedes can drop to the bottom of the grid for all I care. And it's not necessarily because I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. It's because I do not like it when leadership leaves any team member out to dry. It's not like Hamilton and Russell are fighting for a championship and Russell is ahead and they don't want to cannibalize the points. It was strictly out of being petty, and I just don't like that. I am currently no longer a Mercedes fan. I still watch Mercedes because Lewis Hamilton is wearing their uniform. But by the time Lewis Hamilton leaves, they may as well be Alpine. I'm not going to be checking for him. Bear in mind, Russell lost 2 places during the race. Had it not been for the manipulation, he would have lost 3 places. Lewis Hamilton gained 3 places. Had it not been for the manipulation, he would have gained 4, possibly 5. And by the way, he won the fastest lap of the race. That is enough of a story on its own. Needless to say, Twitter blew up against Mercedes. IG blew up against Mercedes. Everyone is disgusted with Mercedes, and quite frankly, so am I. But I don't want the video to end on that note. The GP overall was brilliant. I do think that, Norris, he definitely could have won. That's exciting. I'm happy for Norris. And you know what? Given the situation, I'm also happy for Verstappen, because let's face it, McLaren and Red Bull this time around, simply the best drivers, simply the best team. And, they held it together. And the teams that should have won. And I do think that Lewis Hamilton should have been on the podium instead of George Russell. And we saw some major manipulation there. That's the end of the video. I'm out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.